Greetings all, and welcome to the 5th segment of A Traveler's Guide 2 for Viewros. And today, we will continue our examination of the planet with this 5th segment, A Traveler's Guide to the Great Mines. The Great Mines consist of a series of complex and deep mine tunnels that are discovered and expanded by Lamorn as they search for rare resources for the civilization as it industrialized on Viewros. While the mines themselves are indeed rich in a number of rare materials that helped Lamorn build many of the massive facilities that can be found in the outer reaches of Viewros' habitable areas, the Lamorn also found special crystals down here that can serve as a source of sustenance for them when ground up into a powder, and initially this is all they would use it for. The crystals themselves were the byproduct of the feeding habits of the guardian monster that once dwelled in here, a creature known as Gravanax. The creature itself is thought to have originated from the deepest levels of the mines, named by Lamorn priest Thessar, and moved around with its 8 armored limbs and the 4 sharp horns growing from the front of its head, and had a belly and back that were covered in thick, seemingly impenetrable skin. The drills that Lamorn would develop from mining here in the machine era would have their designs based off the body of this creature and how it spun its form to burrow into solid rock, but that is not all it would provide them. With the dawn of their machine era, the Lamorn discovered that, when refined and processed, Viewros crystals could become ready beacons for the absorption and radiation of both green energy and psychic energy. Both normal Viewros crystals and green energy crystals could be processed and infused with psychic power to become psychic crystals, and were given to all Lamorn that had not been naturally born with a type of psychic crystal in them to begin with. This should have been a moment of wonder for all Lamorn, but it was discovered too late that the psychic crystals obtained from Viewros had an adverse reaction when exposed to green energy, as they readily absorbed and channeled it, transforming those affected into the Grievers. Only Lamorn priests were immune to this, as their natural psychic crystals were unaffected by this phenomenon. The Great Mines were almost immediately abandoned after the Great Tragedy, the Lamorn leaving all their mining equipment and devices behind, and over time, their sheer number of leftover processed psychic crystals, as well as the extreme concentration of green energy deep in the mines, allowed this place to become the perfect spot for a Griever breeding ground, having the largest Griever population on the planet, as well as featuring powerful mutants like Maul Griever brutes and the Omega Griever that were changed into larger and more powerful behemoths from exposure to green energy while developing. It was here that the Hunter was able to navigate and explore the depths of the mines with help from several members of the Galactic Federation military, as well as where she would reacquire the super missile and kill the Omega Griever to obtain the psychic power bomb, which had already been taken from the true guardian of the area when it was killed and eaten by the Omega Griever prior to the Hunter's arrival. Before we start our examination of the major biota in here, there is one unique type of plant to be found here worth noting. The Garbacask are subterranean gourds that are similar in form to the Lysocask, but with a much larger fruiting body that consists of a large, soft, pulpy red fruit covered by a thin, elastic membrane that holds it together and keeps it fresh. Light impacts can be enough to burst this skin if targeted, revealing the juicy vesicles of the fruit and making it weak enough to be destroyed with even basic weapon fire. To defend against this, a thick protective calyx covers it, and the calyx itself is extremely hard, protecting the fruit against most predators well enough to allow it to grow to an enormous size. Each plant may grow several pulps or fruiting bodies, but only one will ever ripen, the others being left in a dormant state. They are not useless, however, as they can still gather energy from chemical reactions with the stones and air of the Great Mines, in turn providing nutrition to the calyx to keep it alive, as it will quickly shrivel and die if the plant loses all the pulps that are supplying it nutrition. Thick vines connect the unripe pulps to the calyx, but they are also dependent upon the unripe pulps for sustenance, as they transfer most of it to the main fruiting body. If the pulps are destroyed then, the vines will wither and die, which will prevent nutrition from reaching the calyx and kill it as well. We've also got one minor entity worth speaking on here. As the name would likely imply, winged lizards are reptiles that live within the confines of the Great Mines on Viewros and fly using a thin membrane that runs along their body, spreading their arms outward to flap or glide, whichever is more needed at any given moment in time. These creatures are unique in that they are poikilotherms, meaning that they cannot regulate their own body temperature outside of instilled behavioral means, and as a result, their low body temperatures encourage them to avoid the direct sunlight in Soul Valley. Instead, they prefer the shadows and more stable temperatures of the Great Mines, as well as the diet of insects they can rely on for sustenance. While they might appear out of nowhere for some, the beasts are not that aggressive and rarely attack any potential threats unless they are provoked, and thus tend to be a little concern for explorers. With that settled, before we take a good look at the rest of unique biota in this area, it is important to note that, as far as previously covered organisms go, this area was home to a scout bot. With that, let's get to the native biota of this area. Cave roaches are small arthropods often found living in groups in the humid caves of Viewros, and are known for the gorgeous shiny look of their pointed and curved shells, as well as the vast nests they form underground. The nests themselves, constructed from threads of secreted protein folded over each other to form a pliable webbing that can resist most forms of attack. Those said proteins will denature and break apart if they are exposed to extreme heat. While cave roaches are omnivorous, they almost never dine on other animals, instead spending their time devouring what little plant matter they can find underground, and occasionally scavenging animal carcasses and any other decaying matter they can find. Despite their small size, they are quite resilient and can survive for very long periods of time with little to no food. This tends to happen more often in cases of more than 10 group members at a time, as the larger numbers makes it difficult for them to secure enough sustenance for everyone. This can often trigger several specimens to band together and leave to form a separate group, keeping social and feeding habits in check for their own sake. Nonetheless, they tend to be more of a pest to others than anything else, and rarely pose a threat even if direct contact is made, and are thus best placed within threat level Alpha. Meteoritas are a type of trilobite-like arthropod found in the Great Mines of Viewros that feed on various types of minerals in the local rock sources, usually consuming them by breaking off pieces of rock and melting them with the highly acidic digestive fluids, enabling them to extract important elements like magnesium, iron, and zinc, among other vital nutrients. The two sensory antennae on their heads are comb-shaped with a large surface area and are able to detect radiation readily, making it easy for them to discern and locate the different distinct elements and minerals they require to sustain their forms. Meteoritas are larger than many other cave-dwelling beasts on Viewros, and while they may be slow-moving, their 4 pairs of legs allow them to readily climb up rock walls, and their large size helps to explain why they often show no fear towards potential threats. This, however, is still kept in check by more unnatural populations within the bowels of their habitats, as their relatively soft, juicy bodies and mineral-rich diet make them prime prey for mole grievers. It is further noted that, in their larval form, these entities go by the colloquial term of shriek bugs, and they typically develop inside of a large cocoon of sorts that helps to keep their soft bodies safe while they develop and grow the thicker exoskeletal coating. The hard and mineral-rich mucus structure that protects them can at least take some minor punishment, but is far from invincible, being readily destroyed with standard gunfire. But this is rarely a wise idea, as they develop their vocal cords earlier than any other structure in their bodies, and if they are killed from their cocoon being ruptured, they will emit a terrifying death shriek loud enough to attract beasts like mole grievers to their location. This seems to be a symbiotic response between the two, as while mole grievers are their biggest and primary predator, they are raised in groups like cattle, so they can still reproduce and build the population numbers while benefiting from the protection of mole grievers against other predators that would seek to kill and consume their young. On their own, however, meteoritas are totally harmless and can even potentially make for good pets, thus being best placed in threat level Alpha.
Normally, I would be letting an other comment here, but I have to state that I honestly think these creatures are a potentially major boon for our capacity to possibly keep some specimens of alien entities alive here on the ship for longer periods of time. They remind me of the saturnine fungus of Talon 4, and how it was used as the basis for rations for elite pirate projects for a time. The mushrooms themselves were safe to handle, even at a mutated giant size, but they still had phazon inside of them that could be consumed to help those elite pirates grow and develop quite readily. I'm going to have to look into this more, and hope that Aaron Ara doesn't grow too attached to any of them. Last thing I need is for that big lummox to have an excuse to throw me around the ship like a rag doll.
Snareweeds are a type of animal-like invertebrate similar in form to venomweed, and tend to live in small, clustered groups within the depths of the great mines. These entities have bioluminescent bacteria on their heads that glow brightly to attract small animals, and the moment they make contact with the snareweed, they will convert their metabolic energy reserves into electrical energy, sending a terrible jolt across their entire body to electrocute and paralyze their prey. Once the prey is immobilized, clumped groups of snareweeds will then wrap around and use secreted acidic fluid to digest and absorb their prey entirely, hard parts and all. However, the mucous membrane that forms their outer skin and helps to keep them hydrated in otherwise dry environments is flammable and easily ignited, providing a terrible weakness that larger creatures can take advantage of, as the nerves in the skin of snareweeds are not equipped to be able to feel or discern pain, and they thus usually remain standing upright, unaware that they are burning to death at all. If killing them is not the aim, however, they are still rather sensitive to sudden flashes of light, and will retract into the ground the moment they are exposed to bright light, only coming back out when they feel it is safe to return to feeding. While they might have a lot in common with venomweed, and therefore have the potential to be a dangerous force to have to deal with if they can't be cleared, their flammable nature means that fire can effectively kill them, and they'll have no real way to prevent this from happening, and thus are best classified as part of threat level beta. Spin darkwings are a subspecies of the standard darkwing, mainly found in underground spaces like caves and tunnels. As with normal darkwings, these beasts hang upside down while resting by digging their hindclaws into a ceiling of some sort, a posture that allows them to quickly take flight when an intruder gets near them. Distinctly though, while gliding, they can adjust the skin membranes on either side of their bodies to send their forms into a spiraling flight, which is where they gain their distinct name. This aids them well, as their capacity to combine this with ambient air currents allows them to fly much faster and thus strike at their targets with greater agility and impact force, but the added air resistance created by this higher speed means that they expend the overall rotational energy faster, resulting in shorter flight distances that demand that they strike within their means quickly and precisely to prevent an early crash into the ground or any other surface. As a whole though, they usually aren't that much bigger of a threat to deal with than their standard relatives above ground, and thus are still best placed in the confines of threat level alpha. Cave Shren, as the name implies, are mainly found in underground caves and are very similar to the standard Shren in their physical forms and attributes, albeit being much more aggressive than other known types. Whenever these creatures can feel the presence of a larger potential threat near their hives, the hives themselves constructed from a mixture of chewed up plants, ores, and cave Shren saliva, and being both fragile and flammable, they will fly out and hold their position nearby before spitting poisonous saliva at their intended target. If cave Shren are fatally wounded by an intruder, an active hormone will be secreted naturally into the nervous system that triggers the sympathetic nerves, putting them into an excited state. In return, they will sacrifice their lives by attempting to ram into the intruder at maximum force, hoping the impact will successfully cause their bodies to burst, not just dealing minor explosive damage, but coating their target in all of the poisonous saliva contained in them, all the hopes of at least protecting their hives. This can make them a general nuisance for most to deal with, especially in cramped spaces where they tend to dwell, but it doesn't necessarily make them any more dangerous than other types of Shren, and thus to occupy a niche within threat level alpha. Pop crawlers are small crustaceans that inhabit the Great Mines, and usually are not a serious threat to others, as they are usually quite docile, resting just beneath the surface of the ground as they feed on small insects there for sustenance. However, they are known to be rather territorial, and will quickly move to just barely being beneath the surface of the ground when they detect an intruder, being able to use their thin forms to wriggle through rock and soil rather easily, despite a lack of notable physical strength. They will then proceed to slap the ground with their tail with enough force to launch the rest of their long, slender bodies into the air, rising to a height of at least 3 meters. At the top of their movement arc, they will launch a solid thorny ball of hard stone fragments and unneeded illuminated biological waste from their mouths in the hopes of damaging and deterring potential threats from getting any closer to them. This can make them a bit of a pain for some to deal with, but because their bodily fluids glow, the light can be seen behind the thinner areas of the exoskeleton and thus can give them away quite readily, making them an easy target for predators that can strike them before they can burrow back into the ground for safety. As such, they are rarely capable of severely harming anything that is larger than them, and can be dispatched with basic firepower easily, thus having a reserved spot within threat level Alpha. Crystal crawlers are unique subspecies of Viewrosian beetle that feed exclusively on the rare Deborah crystals that grow readily in the bowels of the great mines on Viewros, and can sometimes be seen as a pest by those attempting to mine these crystals for both industrial and aesthetic uses. These entities feed by using the 6 fangs arranged around their circular mouth on the abdomen to scrape and pull crystal fragments into their bodies for ingestion and processing. They equally use their fangs to attach their bodies to solid surfaces while they feed and climb around, and they are fairly easy to spot because their outer shells are made from hardened Deborah crystal waste, a powerful coating that essentially makes them immune to damage from most types of weapons. What truly makes these creatures fascinating, however, is that the top of their shell features crystalline protrusions that can absorb certain types of energy waves, specifically psychic energy waves, making it possible to use their bodies as makeshift psychic grapple points. Their natural behavior assists this immensely, as these beasts are highly vigilant. The moment they can sense a disturbance on their outer shell, they will dig their fangs into a present surface they are on and maintain this defensive posture until they are sure that they are safe again. So they will never move out of the way when they are actively being interacted with through psychic grapple technology. Since this doesn't have any long-term harmful effects on them, and they can't really directly harm others if they are not struck by the fangs on the other side of their body, these entities can potentially be more helpful than harmful, and in turn are best placed in threat level Alpha.
Hi, yes, it's me again, doing a bit here because I forced Aaron R to give me the spotlight once more. Capturing and studying these sorts of creatures is normally his work, but I had to get a hold of some for myself to at least observe. The capacity to generate such unique crystal bodies that are all but impervious to damage as a mere waste product is utterly fascinating, and the implications of it all are incredible. Think of it, a creature that makes its own impervious armor merely by eating. You know, a thing that a lot of beasts do normally as a part of just trying to thrive and survive. You can make a self-generating armor system that would require only basic inputs to make something that would render it all but impossible for others to harm. If the Chozo can make armor suits that are semi-organic and thus partially alive, then maybe so can we. Of course, that would require that I have enough of their natural foodstuff to keep them alive long enough for long-term studies to be possible, and we could only grab so much cargo for the ship to support. Still, though, I am going to focus as much time as I can on the few we did bring back, and see what I can discover before they perish. I may yet give Emil an armor suit that even his trigger-happy tendencies won't be able to accidentally break.
The Gora Gaspore is a green cave-dwelling variant of the standard Gaspore that possesses a shell, skin, and rhizomes that are much harder than those seen in other variants. So strong in fact that they can't be penetrated with firearms or even ruptured by intense sonic boom generating weapons. These iterations still release the sporangium as floating projectiles of a sort, suspended in the air by lighter than air internal gases, the sporangium exploding on contact to more readily disperse the spores contained within, but the sporangium possess much thicker skins that make it impossible to penetrate their outer shell with traditional beam weapons, merely causing the sporangium to be bounced backwards to change its flight pattern instead, as they experience an energetic impulse of sorts across their surface. Because of mutations brought on by constant exposure to green energy, these spores chemically react with the surrounding air when they are released and generate an extremely corrosive mist that can limit the overall spread of the spores. Moreover, this corrosive chemical gas is so potent that it can affect the Gora gas spore that birthed them in the first place, essentially destroying their parent if they are directly and explosively exposed to their own spores on any part of their body. It is a bit ironic that the only thing that can seemingly penetrate and seriously harm these creatures are indeed their own offspring, but the explosive nature of them nonetheless makes the acid inside a bigger threat to deal with and a pain to handle if they can't be hit with something hard to knock their sporangium back towards their parent fungus quickly, though not enough to raise them substantially higher within threat level beta. Maul Grievers are Grievers that have adapted to the complex cave system of the Great Mines, and tend to be a noble threat for their capacity to appear literally anywhere in the mines at any time, being able to move between different parts of it quickly by burrowing through the ground at high speeds using their tough forearms and sharp durable claws. Their sense of sight has effectively faded almost entirely from adaptation to their native dark habitat, but a well-developed sense of hearing helps them to locate prey at great distances, even through solid stone. Compared to other types of Grievers, due to partial gene alterations that are unique to them, Maul Grievers are able to reproduce in extreme numbers and can readily cooperate with their kind to make the most of this, often trying to overwhelm targets with sheer numbers to take them down with constant waves of attacks from different individual groups. They can even produce a sticky, viscous liquid-like substance made from phlegm and their stomach acids that hardens into a thick elastic webbing when exposed to the air that is so shock absorbent that it can't be destroyed with conventional firepower, helping to wall off nests or otherwise create choke points they can use to funnel prey into zones of certain death. While this may make them seem like a genuine terror to have to deal with, the smooth and thin skin of these beasts, while aiding them in digging immensely, is formed from a lack of fortifying exposure to vitamin D and other important vitamins in the system, and makes them slightly frailer and more susceptible to injury and death from the attacks of others. Even so, great caution is recommended with them, as the sound waves produced by a concussive weapon like a missile is enough to gain their attention and send them scurrying towards the source of the noise. All in all, these Griever variants can really make themselves into a force to be reckoned with the moment they start to appear in numbers, and given their penchant for attacking in unrelenting waves, this gives them a shared space among other types of Grievers, right within threat level Gamma. Griever bombers are almost entirely identical to Maul Grievers, but they are different from the norm of their kind because of a tweak in the gene expression that grants them the capacity to mix the venom they generate naturally with their own blood by using a special gland to pump it straight into their bloodstream. The resulting mixture can severely cut the lifespan of these entities, as their blood vessels are not immune to it and thus will degrade over time. As such, to rectify this and give them a chance to biologically and socially assist their kind, Griever bombers will intentionally mix their venom into their own blood when they sense a potential threat to their kind close by, creating an explosive bodily fluid that they can then ignite when close to their target or otherwise severely injured, turning them into living bombs that detonate violently to shower their target with venom and acid simultaneously, often resulting in massive damage, if not outright killing and taking their target down with them. Worse yet, even if this doesn't do the trick on its own, the noise that these beasts cry out as they die is enough to attract the attention of other Maul Grievers to the location of death, with only freezing weapons being able to stifle this call and prevent them from exploding and or attracting more backup. These variants of the Maul Griever may not typically last very long once angered, but the explosive nature of this form nonetheless makes them a threat more than worthy of threat level Gamma as well, and best stopped in their tracks with any type of freezing weapon before their suicide attacks can be completed.
Oh dear. I knew the things had the potential here to get bad, but I didn't think it could honestly get this bad. These are by far the most brutish and degenerated of all the Grievers as far as their minds and bodies are concerned. Their warped pale form so far gone, even from other Grievers, that it's almost... No, it is terrifying. It seems life below the surface has made them the top predators despite some loss of overall resilience, and their capacity to dig through earth and stone is much greater than I would have expected, so their strength is still more than intact. But the sheer number of them, that is what honestly scares me more than anything else, the bomber variants notwithstanding. It's abundantly clear that these Grievers have been breeding in massive numbers for an incredibly long period of time, and I don't think I want to dare even guess just how numerous the numbers truly are at this point. I can hardly believe it that so many could be here at once, so vast that it almost makes you wish they were still Lamorn. But no, not these ones. None of them were ever Lamorn, merely more spawn of monsters that were made in times long past. I can't feel sympathy for this breed, I'm afraid. I see nothing more than monsters in these ones. Nothing more at all.
Mole Griever brutes are a unique variant of the otherwise standard form of Grievers, and are the result of the influx of green energy during the incubation of Lamorn eggs, the cocoons themselves also being much larger than normal and often pulsing with absorbed green energy. Brutes are notably larger than normal mole Grievers, with an almost insect-like head and arms that are approximately 10 times stronger to make them serious physical combatants. Plus, their leg strength has also been seriously improved, enabling them to still move rather swiftly despite their immense bulk, something that even space pirates couldn't manage to do with phase-on with elite pirates. While the overall attack behavior is fundamentally identical to that used by normal Grievers, their enhanced strength nonetheless makes them especially dangerous, and in addition to the poisonous saliva possessed by other Grievers, they're able to use a new gland located inside of their mouth to spit out a sticky mucus that, when it comes into contact with the air, turns into a viscous gel that is used to restrain prey to make them easy pickings for these brutes. Formations made with the sticky gel are known as Griever gates, and they help these beasts seal off certain caverns and other locations to help them funnel prey more readily towards the layout, and only powerful sonic-based weaponry can actually destroy them. Mole Griever brutes are extremely resilient to damage on account of their larger frames and much thicker skin compared to normal Grievers, and can thus take an immense amount of punishment to seriously harm and terminate. This, combined with their exceptional degree of aggression and capacity to seemingly take tremendous amounts of punishment before finally falling to extensive firepower, renders them a serious and potentially devastating threat to handle in any real capacity, and sometimes even more so if they're able to call in mole Grievers and Griever bombers to assist them in dealing with persistent threats, possessing a solid place within the ranks of threat level Delta.
Good lord, I swear. It's like the elite pirate situation all over again. And in hindsight, none of us at all ever want to have to look back at those times as anything approaching good or even morally acceptable in any way, shape, or form. We have come a hell of a long way since those days, even with the colleagues I once shared on Aether. But green energy as a whole has always just felt this way, you know? Like a repeat of Phase-On. And given that it may not have come from Viewros originally, the parallels are more than worth making, I'd say. However, unlike elite pirates and their ilk, these monsters honestly don't have anything truly special about them. Sure, the added muscle, stronger acid, sticky goo, and the capacity to use their sheer strength to just smash the ground violently enough to deal damage is noteworthy, but since there's no tech involved, they didn't have the benefit of stronger firepower that a normal pirate trooper just couldn't effectively carry and use. On the other hand, though, they still had their speed on their side, so I suppose that's a fair counterbalance. Either way, they do little but bring back bad memories for all of us, and I can't stop looking at them soon enough.
The strongest of all the Grievers was the Omega Griever, an entity born of extreme and constant exposure to hyper-concentrated green energy, and of such extreme power that it can only have been the product of extensive mutation over a long period of time. And given the abnormal shape of its torso and head, this very much does seem to be the case. It is strongly believed that, given it had access to a psychic upgrade for the Hunter, already in upgrade form, without the need for the Omega Griever to be killed for it, the entity likely had already attacked, killed, and eaten Gravanax, the true guardian of the great minds that the Lamorn had entrusted one of their master teleporter keys to, which further serves as a serious testament to its immense strength. Compared to other Grievers, the Omega Griever was much larger and stronger than even the Mole Griever brute, existing as the apex predator of the entire Great Minds ecosystem, and its towering and sturdy form more than made this clear. The large, sharp claws on its two pairs of arms and legs were strong and sharp enough to readily pierce stone, allowing it to quickly move along cave walls to maneuver around its prey with great agility, even leaping between the walls of its cavern brooding grounds to trip up prey. The entity itself did not have much in the way of unique attacks at its disposal, relying on wide sprays of venom and its clawed arms as primary attacks, but its size and strength was still so immense that it could also generate pulverizing compression waves of stone around it by slamming the ground harshly, fire a massive sweeping beam of acid and condensed green energy to vaporize anything that got in its way, and lash out with its elastic tongue to take hold of an enemy to either try and bring it in close to crunch on said prey with the Omega's hard teeth, or, in the cases of true desperation, demonstrate the capacity to use its tongue which had a split tip with fine teeth lining the inside and a harpoon-like stinger at the center of its opening, to pierce even the hardest of metals and hides to steadily absorb the vital fluids and life energy of a target, an attack that is believed to have been the tool used to kill the otherwise impenetrable hide of Gravanax. In addition, the absorption of so much green energy into its system had the unintended effect of causing parts of its body to undergo keratinization, forming thick skin-type patches of blackish-blue armor across some parts of its form, glowing green veins and blood vessels barely visible beneath the surface. These armored sections of flesh were completely immune to damage, but damage to any portions of its body that were otherwise normal could cause strain on the beast in overloaded subdermal structures and muscles, eventually causing its nervous system to crash out almost entirely. A concussive blast from a psychic bomb to its abdomen in this dazed state would render the entity unconscious, leaving the central glowing organ on its abdomen where its heart was open to fire. Though this monster put up a hell of a fight, summoning the aid of mole Grievers and Griever bombers from time to time to give it the chance to recover its stamina fully, and with more parts of its body becoming keratinized over time as its body was damaged, put into overdrive and allowed to absorb dense pockets of green energy to regenerate parts of its body, and even tried to feign death as it was growing weaker before surprise attacking the hunter to try and kill her with no warning, she was eventually able to put down the monster, and was rewarded with access to the psychic power bomb upgrade it had eaten from killing the mine's true guardian. This utter monstrosity was truly a stage of Griever evolution the likes of which the Lamorn could likely have never imagined even be possible to them, and probably is a form of evolution that is no real equivalent among the Lamorn themselves, and that may be for the best. Being able to kill a guardian all on its own more than shows the terrible power this brood could make use of, and with its body becoming increasingly difficult to directly damage the more it was hurt, it served as one of the biggest obstacles the hunter had to get past in her efforts to save the memory of the Lamorn, and more than occupies a rightful spot within the confines of threat level Epsilon.
Now that is an ugly piece of work if I ever did see one. This thing was the pinnacle of Griever evolution to the utmost, and I dare anyone to tell me they can get much worse than this thing. Same song and dance as far as what it could really do for the most part, but all of it ramped up to 11 and made a hell of a lot more threatening and difficult to deal with because the damn thing was so strong that even compared to the brutes of their kind, its basic attacks could spread farther and cause quakes and just far, far more wide-ranging damage compared to its lesser brethren in every way. Also, considering the mole Grievers are kinda known for being a bit weaker defensively compared to other types, the fact that it not only had a hardened skin like armor, but could keep covering more and more of its body in this stuff as it absorbed green energy around the layer of the guardian it killed is impressive, and it could intelligently make good use of its own biology to make it hard to hurt by focusing on the parts of its form that have been taken far more so than others. But can we also take a moment to appreciate that this thing was clever enough to play dead if it meant killing the hunter with its secret weapon? That shows a level of intelligence that other Grievers just don't have. The parallel to this and the Omega Pirate on our end is justified, and for having something that could drain life energy like a Metroid attached to its elastic and nasty-ass tongue, I gotta give it some respect. Still ugly as hell, but I wouldn't even think of trying to share a room with that beast.
Despite the deep depths of this area being filled to the brim with life of all sorts, most of the creatures that tend to dwell here are rather tame compared to what can be found elsewhere, and as a consequence, many parts of the mine can actually be safe to traverse, or at least somewhat reasonable. However, the sheer number of Grievers of many types can nonetheless make it a severe hazard to handle and extremely dangerous to try and explore if you can't keep quiet, as even the slightest echo from an explosive can be enough to attract hordes of the beasts with little notice. This is not a place that most should ever truly investigate and explore without both extreme firepower and as much help as possible, as the sheer number of hungry beasts that lay in wait is too much for anyone to go in alone, and even with help, might still have to pick and choose their battles carefully if they want to get out alive. So that was a hell of an adventure to say the least, and I think we all agree that we would rather not do that again. With as much noise as a lot of us tend to make when we do anything, we honestly thought that we were going to get overwhelmed. Damn good thing Aaron and I decided to come in for some serious backup. Thankfully, we're almost done with our examination of Viewros, but the last place to explore is also the largest and holds the most secrets of them all. So tune in for our next examination video, as we explore the vast sands of Soul Valley and the confines of Chrono Tower. Thank you all for watching this video. We here at Space Pirate Science Team take our work very seriously, and we genuinely wish to be as informative as possible when it comes to the work we conduct here, for both ourselves and in the name of science. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment to help us get greater recognition out there to inform the greater populace of the universe as a whole. Also, feel free to keep track of us through Twitter, as we'll be posting notices there every time something new is submitted for your viewing pleasure. We hope to see you all in the next video, no matter what world it may take us to.